Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Green Zone Podcast. This is episode 4. Today, this Thursday evening, this will be going up here. Today, we're going to be tackling some different topics. Today, I'm going to be looking at different dialogues here, reaction to the NCAA finals, what that means for Dan Hurley staying put at UConn, potentially Coach John Calipari leaving for Arkansas to take on that basketball program. And we're also going to look at Caitlin Clark and her outlook as she heads to the WNBA and some of the recent headlines that she's been taking away by certain athletes and whatnot. The Masters are underway today on this first Thursday of the year, so it is Masters season. We're going to look at some of that takeaways starting off the year. We're doing some other stuff too today, so we're going to jump right into this one. We're going to start off UConn men's basketball comes away with a victory over Purdue last Monday's national championship game. I don't want to say it's one of the most more boring games I've seen in a long time, but I think it's one of the most dominant games I've seen, just from the pure fact of, UConn's easily the best program in the country. I don't think anyone's denying that. And I think if you're looking at what the UConn program has been now, 6 national championships since 1999. I think now you can probably make the case that they're the most dominant program. Um, Probably, they're not a on the verge blue blood team anymore. I think if you look at the blue bloods, you look at North Carolina, you look at Duke. Um, Usually, I kind of like to put it in fours, like with the Mount Rushmore. So if you put Duke, North Carolina, um, I like to think that Kansas is up there. For a blue blood, they recruit a lot of really good players, make a lot of good year in year out. They're competing just about every year for the tournament. So I want to put Kansas on there, but I don't think you can leave UConn off there. I think it's hard to say not Kentucky, but Kentucky's only won one championship since 95. I want to say ever since Pitino was there, but they only won one title under Calipari. Um, and I think UCLA, you can say the same thing. They haven't been relevant really for some years now, especially not championship wise for since the late 90s with Ed O'Bannon and some of those guys there. But UConn definitely making a case that there should be a top product now in college basketball. And I think you have to give all the credit there over to Dan Hurley, taking that program basically from a recovering program since Kevin Ollie left. And yes, they did win a championship under Ollie and 3 under Jim Calhoun, but Dan Hurley, I think, has elevated this program to something that we have not seen in college basketball for a long time. It's a program dominated with chemistry, I think more so than recruits. Um, I think when you're looking at recruits, yes, Duke, North Carolina, Kentucky, some of those other schools dominate the recruiting aspect of the game. But I think what UConn has done really well these last couple of years that have really helped them be in the place that they want to be to compete for championships. They've built the chemistry, they've built, taking the years that it takes to build up a program, courtesy of what Dan Hurley has done ever since coming from Rhode Island there. But you look at some of those guys, they're NBA products, sure, and I think they are NBA products because that they do play for UConn. They're going to have some exposure on national television. That's definitely comes with a plus of being a number one team in the country. But I think when you look at it too, you have to see that UConn is simply doing recruiting things a different way, recruiting guys a little different way, and it's paying off here the last 2 years. I mean, this is probably, as Dan Hurley put the other day, it's maybe the most dominant 2 year run for any program in a long time. And he said that'd be due to the fact that it was a new team, basically losing 3 starters last year to the NBA, and comparing that to the other back-to-back schools, the last two that have done it, UConn in 2006 and 7 and Duke in 92, 93. Um, I think he does have a point. I think when you look at the Duke team in 92, 93, having Bobby Hurley, having Grant Hill, having Christian Laettner, and basically saying we're going to do this again, where no one's going to leave. It's different eras too, where the money's different. Where um, leaving now for millions of dollars in 1992, 93, I forget what the rookie salary was, but not even close to what a first round product's going to be today. And then look at the Florida team in 06 and 07 with Corey Brewer, Joakim Noah, those guys too. I mean, those are two guys that basically took championship teams and said, well, let's just run it back, do it again. I think that UConn having to find missing pieces, whether they're in their program or not in their program for their last championship. That's definitely something that you have to applaud Dan Hurley for being adaptable and resilient that to some of those things of leaving a school that, when you look at some teams that have gone back to back, even say Final Fours, they're very different teams. I think the only team I can remember recently, it comes to my head, even with Villanova winning their teams back, I think they were a couple of years apart. Um, or even the Butler teams that fell to Duke in back-to-back years, those were pretty much the same teams too. But I think it's going to take a long time before we will see a program that UConn has done here, the blueprint that they've done the last few years with Dan Hurley, building that team to where they probably deserve to be, the way that they recruit their players and bring them in, develop them, and balance them out to work in a team aspect. So other big news heading this week, Coach Calipari is heading off to Arkansas, and it's a complicated legacy. I think that leaves um, Kentucky basketball in these last few years, where losing to Oakland this year, losing to St. Peter's a couple years before, never really being competitive in these last four um, March tournaments, NCAA tournaments, and yes, the recent bias towards that of saying that what Calipari did was a failure or did not really live up to expectations. You still have to look at his agenda. What was it, Kentucky? And it was the same thing that kind of translated from Memphis is that if we can get the best players in the country, come in here, play for a year, boom, straight away get to the NBA, and then do the same thing year in and year out. You have to look at the players that he's brought in from the beginning, such as Eric Bledsoe, John Wall, DeMarcus Cousins. Towards the middle years, I would say, with Devin Booker, Willie Cauley-Stein, Karl Anthony Towns for sure. In these last few years or so, I think the blueprint has kind of changed a little bit in college basketball. Yeah, the one and done is prevalent. It still is, but I think it's changed a little bit with the transfer portal. Is that you're bringing in dudes who might be their first year playing for you, but they are the third or fourth year total, maybe even a fifth year possibly. The transfer portal is changing, I think, the way guys recruit. When you look at how many guys you do recruit, or how many at certain position you're going to change, look at, because if we can get this 6'7" dude from Long Beach State, I'd rather have that guy on my team right now than some 18-year-old from, Connecticut. That's kind of a thing where looking at what's going to be more successful right away, probably bringing in a transfer will work. It's almost like bringing in a short-term free agent on a one-year deal. Just have them link up with you for the year, see what you can do with it, and then we'll decide. We'll figure that out down the road if there's other recruits in other years that you want to attack and put your attention to that way. But for Calipari, I know he said in his introductory press conference, I've talked to the team and there is no team. I think it shows what's going to happen here in these next couple of weeks and possibly months. Maybe recruits might um, come at him. It might be a very similar to a Patino situation that when he's at St. John's right now, where the recruiting process, the signing days are already over. These high school kids are already getting prepared to go play for their teams. So I don't think Arkansas is going to be a night and day change like any program with a new coach that comes in. It's never night and day like turn around. We're going to be contenders right away. But what I do think Calipari at Arkansas can definitely in a few years basically make it uh, not, I don't want to say a powerhouse in the SEC because whoever Kentucky does bring in is going to have more money, more resources in this era of NIL money. It's definitely a huge factor into why some players decide to go somewhere, to not go somewhere, to pull out somewhere and transfer into somewhere else because they can get that other NIL money. It's definitely something that I think you have to address, and that Kentucky's just simply going to have more of than Arkansas. But Arkansas has not had really its glory days of basketball probably to the late 90s. I don't see a reason why Calipari can't bring that program back to what they once were. I mean, I'm not the biggest Calipari fan myself. I think that there's um, other ways, other coaches I probably just look at and say I, appreciate that guy's work a little bit more. But I think you do have to respect what Calipari has done for the NBA, even beyond the college game. I think he's kind of one of a kind, revolutionary in flipping players to the NBA. I don't think it'll be too much time before Calipari is definitely making some big strides at Arkansas and making them be another Power Five school and a Power Five program. On the other side of the national championship games, I did predict in my last episode that South Carolina would take on Iowa for the national championship. Uh, and I did predict that South Carolina would be national champions. And I did see that. I did predict that. That's very few or rare times. I know it's easy to predict the Final Four. You only got to pick about 3 games, but um, it officially ends the college career of Caitlin Clark, the all-time scorer in men's or women's college basketball, only 10 rebounds shy, I believe being the second player only to have 3,000 points, 1,000 assists, and 1,000 rebounds. I think Sabrina Ionescu is the only one who has that. But I think you have to look at what Caitlin Clark has done in college basketball. Uh, and I've seen the videos on TikTok, on YouTube, on Twitter, or X, looking at some of these responses to what Caitlin Clark has done with Diana Taurasi pretty much saying that, it's going to be a different league up here. It's not going to translate. Other players saying that her scoring record is not really intact. Other things like that. But I really don't think that um, what Caitlin Clark has done for college basketball is by far a negative thing at all. I saw another one, Brianna Stewart, saying that she had to win a national championship to be considered an all-time great. Well, it's easy for Brianna Stewart to say when you go to a school like UConn and their 4-year dominance, they went 4 straight. I think it's really easy to sit there and say, well, I have 4 national championships. So I'm considered an all-time great. So if you don't win one, you're not an all-time great. I don't really think that's fair because Iowa's never been a basketball powerhouse for women's, as far as I'm concerned. And Caitlin Clark not only turned this team into a powerhouse, the school into a powerhouse for women's basketball. We'll see down the future what kind of media exposure they get. Other recruits maybe that want to come in and play there because of what Caitlin Clark has done at Iowa. But look at what she's done for the game. I think it was the women's game outnumbered the men's game in terms of viewership. Um, I think when you I'm going to make a prediction that this year's number one pick in the NBA draft and this year's number one pick in the WNBA draft, pretty much being Caitlin Clark, there will be more hype surrounding Caitlin Clark than there will be whoever is going to be the men's number one pick in this year's draft. And I think there's going to be more media attention turned to debuts. I think if you pulled viewership of the Indiana Fever, their first game, and whoever's going to get the first pick in the NBA draft this way, if they're both on ESPN or a nationally televised game, Caitlin Clark's going to get the upper hand in viewership. And that is not a disgrace or a disservice, I should say, to anything the NBA is trying to do in terms of marketing their players. The Caitlin Clark effect is real. It is absolutely 1,000% real. Looking at this year's draft, I mean, I could probably name 3, 4, 5 players that are going to get drafted to WNBA squads that instantly make that team a lot more watchable. Cameron Brink being one, Angel Reese being another. There are definitely more WNBA players that are going to get more attention based on the effect. We call it the Caitlin Clark effect, even though it might affect different players like Paige Beckers, like Cameron Brink, like Angel Reese. But it all stems from where Caitlin Clark has elevated the women's basketball game to a national stage. There will be, I think, a few WNBA sellouts this year that don't include Caitlin Clark. It might be a little bit of a stretch to say that, but I think that what she's done certainly has to have some major applaud, even though she fell short of a national championship twice, following the national championship game last year to LSU and this year to South Carolina. But there is not a disservice at all to what she has done for the game. And I hate the fact that she's being put down by some of the WNBA's current players, past players. It's not fair at all. It really isn't fair to what she's done and what she's going to do down the road. This thing, the Caitlin Clark jerseys that you see in the crowds of the Lions outside these major arenas that hold 15, 16, 17, 18,000 people, they're not going to go away. When Caitlin Clark comes to town, when she goes to Los Angeles to play against the Sparks, Minnesota against the Lynx, the Liberty in New York, she's going to sell out those arenas. And I've seen what the Vegas Aces have done. They've already decided to move some of their home games to at least the first game of the year that I think that the Indiana Fever play to the T-Mobile Arena where they host the Vegas Golden Knights. And I think that's because they're going to sell out. I really do believe they're going to sell out that first game because Caitlin Clark is there, because Caitlin Clark is a part of the Indiana Fever, and she's going to be for the time being. I think that franchise, when you look at the team value, I'm not sure if it's the same ownership as the Indiana Pacers, but I'd imagine it would be. But the price of that franchise is instantly going to go up because that Caitlin Clark's on that team. And I hate the fact, like I say, that she's being basically diminished to being an afterthought. And just because she fell short of a national championship, or people feel that she's going to fall short as a rookie, which, there's definitely probably going to be growing pains. It comes from playing a collegiate game to having to adjust to a game full of women who have played in the sport for 5, 10, 15, and the eyes of Diane Taurasi, almost 20 years. Um, there's definitely going to be an adjustment for Caitlin Clark, but I think the biggest adjustment the WNBA is going to have for Caitlin Clark is what she's going to bring to the sport. And that's going to be eye opening because I don't think the WNBA has seen someone like Caitlin Clark maybe since Maya Moore or Brittany Griner. I really don't think there's any players since then, maybe Brianna Stewart, but have really elevated the game to a spec or to a part of it where it's a must-watch TV game on a regular season game on a Tuesday in June. I really don't think so. Um, I think she's going to head to WBA as probably the most polarizing player ever. She's going to probably head in with the same amount of people who want to see her fail and see her succeed. And I think that's just part of what makes you successful. We've seen countless other athletes in college, Tim Tebow, Johnny Manziel, in different sports that want to see you fail right away because they, have seen you at the top for so long. And it's easy to sit down. But I think Caitlin Clark is going to just do tremendous things for the WNBA. Cannot wait to see what she's going to do. For the first time in a long time, I'm actually excited to see a WNBA season play out, see what happens going forward for that. It's Thursday, March 11th, or excuse me, April 11th, here behind a little bit. But the Masters are officially underway. Looking at the leaderboard right now, Bryson DeChambeau is in the first place with a 7 under round one. Scotty Scheffler right behind him with a 6 under first round. Some play is still suspended to rain, so they will pick up tomorrow. Some other names down there: Will Zalatoris and Patrick Reed, both tied for 9th place. 2 under with Tommy Fleetwood in there as well. Max Homa tied for 4th place right now. Former winner Danny Willett in there tied for 4th with a 4 under round as well. Tony Finau at 1 under. Victor Hovland at 1 under. Tiger Woods at 1 under. Sergio Garcia, another past champion, at even par through their first round. It's interesting to look at what we see for golf right now, where it stands. It's very awkward to see live players, PGA players in the same atmosphere, in the same lineup, really, right now. And we really only see that for 4 or 5 days a year with the majors. But it's really, when you think about it, what Live Golf stands for, what PGA Tour stands for, and how they're so different. But it's also really interesting to look at where they're at and how far they really might be from seeing some sort of merger come into play. I don't know what's going to happen in terms of the eyes of the money that these guys signed up for. John Rahm, I think, getting 350 million. Dustin Johnson, all those guys, pretty much the bar set at $300 million. I don't blame guys for going to Live. If you get an offer like that, there is no guarantee ever that you will ever play and make that much money on the PGA Tour. So to get that kind of money offered in almost a contract way, I really don't see. Obviously it's not a great look for the sport, but I really don't blame people for trying to go to that league, join that. When you get that kind of money being thrown at you, it's a real easy way to say, why not? But looking at the leaderboard too, I see, I mentioned Tiger Woods down there, 1 under par, tied for 17th. He finished through 13 holes, so he'll have to finish the final 4, finish 5 holes actually, excuse me, tomorrow, and then pick up from there. But for Tiger, for a green jacket, I think number 6 we're looking at. The real odds of him being in that final grouping on Sunday, or at least within striking distance, I think Tiger making the cut, Tiger finishing maybe top 20 would be a tremendous victory for Tiger at this point in his career, not really in kind of competition to win. But being able to come back for the sport, everyone knows it's just like what I mentioned earlier with Caitlin Clark, that there is a viewership, there's a place for Tiger Woods in golf at any stage of his career. It's really fun to watch him in that, realm, in that arena. But looking at where Tiger needs to be, and that's the thing with the Masters too is, DeChambeau leads today at 7 under. Scheffler is right behind him at 6. But if anyone out there knows about golf, the Masters tournament is very much a marathon, very much not a sprint. After one day, being within striking distance can get you in a very good spot. Can next day can put you in a very bad spot. So Augusta National is a sport that and a course that really humbles you as fast as you want to think it's going your way. Augusta National will definitely humble you, and we'll have to check into that. By the time my next podcast airs, next episode, this will be officially underway. I'm going to predict right now. I think Scotty Scheffler is going to win this one. I picked him. I had Alexander Schauffele up there high on my list. For now, I think Schauffele currently sits at 2 over, so I'll see a little bit of bounce back there. But Scotty Scheffler is at the top of his game right now. Looking at that, hard to say. With an open field with live guys in there, with DeChambeau, with Dustin Johnson, um, Sergio Garcia. You look at John Rahm in there. Hard to see why those guys couldn't compete to be in that final grouping on Sunday. And it's such an awkward thing for the sport, though. For DeChambeau, these guys, Brooks Koepka, win the tournament on Sunday and ride off into sunset, and we will not see them for 2 or 3 months until the next major. And I think when you look at the PGA, where they want to be, it's probably the worst case scenario for a live guy to win because it's no longer an ability for them to be able to be marketable for the time being. And we look back at next year, we're going to have, I think I saw something that said, the Masters dinner every year. 7 guys this year have now gone to live. So it's definitely a different, uh, wholly different game, different money. And I think it's really interesting to see how um, that grouping, how it's going to fare in the future, where that golf is going to be at. I know this live thing is almost 2 years old from guys leaving and joining live golf, but it's definitely something that you have to look at and say, there has to be some, uh, method to the madness or something that's going to happen here with PGA Tour golf. Or the money is going to have to change in some way, shape, or form. Because if someone offers me $350 million to play less golf, spend more time with my family, be on the road less, I would take it probably any day of the week, even though regardless of what the legacy aspect is, at the same point, we're all going to have a golf career. We're all going to have um, certain decisions we have to make in our lives. That at the end of the day, you look at live golf and PGA Tour comes together for the most important days of the year. So we'll have to see what happens with the Masters and how that folds into next week. Where I'll probably be reacting to some of that on my next podcast here on episode 5 on the Green Zone podcast, exclusively here on our YouTube channel. Now, other news today, looking at the reaction, OJ Simpson, um, died today at the age of 76 after fighting a battle with cancer. Really a complicated legacy. I think we talked about OJ Simpson uh, in the eyes of the sports world. You have to look at it and say, you can't look to yourself in the mirror and say, OJ Simpson's probably not one of the 10 most dominating running backs I've ever played. There's no way. 2,000 yards will never be eclipsed in 14 games ever. I'm sorry. I'm confidently saying that. With the NFL now expanding to 17 games, and we see guys like Derrick Henry, some dudes flirting with 2,000 with 17 games. In 14 games, this will never happen. I think we would look at the overall legacy that OJ has from the football world has to be something about um, one of the most dominant running backs that we've ever seen. And I'm looking at here that yardage of 143.1 yards per game never be touched. That'll never be touched. When we look at Eric Dickerson's career, with Dickerson making the rookie record 2,106 yards, still when we look at Dickerson, the yards per game still is not even on par to what OJ's is in terms of getting 100 more yards, 2 more games. So you talk about 50 less yards per game, probably looking at where Dickerson was in a different game too, definitely with OJ's, with Dickerson averaging here 131.6 yards per game. Um, and OJ almost at 12 more yards a game for two more games. Doesn't sound like much. It sounds like if you have something that becomes, um, more, it could be attainable, I think, maybe, but I don't really see with the NFL becoming more of a passing game anyway. Any reason why OJ's record of 143 yards per game will ever be touched until maybe the NFL maybe re-identifies itself. But it's easy to say now when you're looking at the way a sport sits, passing game, home run league, golf's in a very much a long ball, driving the ball at the tee league. Hockey's a very much more skill-based league. Some of those roles have gone away. It's easy to say I don't see something changing from a sports aspect because, it's just the way we see it right now. But I don't really think that the effectiveness, the way with math, probability, um, the more, math side of the game that we'll see another team that decides to run the ball as many times this year. OJ ran it 332 times last in that season, and I want to see what uh what the rushing attempts leader was um this year. Kyron Williams this year running the ball 228 times, which is the most in the NFL there. And Kyron only played 12 games. So looking at that, you're getting so many touches per game. They're 19 per game, which leads the league. But OJ getting it 333 times in less games, in 14 games, taking three less games. And Kyron Williams has almost 100 less, carries in a game. It's really hard to say that OJ Simpson season's not the greatest rushing season we've ever seen. Retired second all time in rushing yards, right behind Jim Brown. But then there's the complicated side of things of being, acquitted of the double murders in 1994 of his wife Nicole Brown Simpson and Ron Goldman, and then the kidnapping charges back in 2008. I want to say it's really hard to look at O.J. Simpson's life and not think of the two things. It's impossible. You'll never see an athlete have a bigger fall from grace after being such a loved celebrity, even being an actor after the game of football and sportscaster on Monday Night Football. You'll never see a guy quite like that have the fall that he did. Um, and to be, where OJ was in the last few years after getting out of prison, being in a weird spot where, you're loved by a very small corner of the world. You're loved by um people that didn't really care that you got acquitted, didn't really get tried for murder. For kids like me, we never saw OJ, so all we know is about the double murders and the kidnapping charges in 2008. We never saw OJ play, so there's no nostalgic feeling for us at all, really. And then you look at some of the people older than me, still there's a tainted legacy there too, of terms of totally when you look at the eyes of when something happens as significant as that the opinion has to change for some people. So the NFL, I guess, loses one of its greatest running backs we've ever seen at the age of 76 there today. But at the same time, I think, the world probably loses one of its most controversial people of all time. So it's one of those things where it's a tough line to say if it's a great loss, condolences out to his family and whatnot. But you can officially put to bed the whole, the O.J. Simpson murder cases. Pretty much you can say put to bed. O.J. will never see if the killers actually got caught. That's what we say. Never want to be in L.A. because they be afraid you ran into the killers. But, um, for the NFL, we might not see a running back ever like O.J. Simpson again. I don't think there will ever be another one like him. And I don't think as a society we will see quite another celebrity have a bigger fall from grace than O.J. Simpson. So, one of the biggest celebrities, I guess you could say, most controversial celebrities, died today, age of 76. So, I want to thank you all for listening today. Want to thank the St. Scholastica studio, which I'm in today, recording this episode for you. We're going to be exclusively on our Green Zone Podcast YouTube channel. Find us on Twitter, Green Zone Podcast. So I'm Cameron Green for episode 5. will be coming next week, I believe, at some point. I want to thank you all today for tuning in to me, and we'll see you in the next one. Peace out.